Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Neal Schaffer. And Neal is going to be talking about one of his new books, because he's a prolific writer. Maximizing LinkedIn for Business Growth, a practical guide to building your brand and driving results. Great little book, Neal.
Thank you.
Where can people find you?
Sure. Well, Neal Schaffer is my name. So nealschaffer.com, Neal Schaffer on LinkedIn, Nealschaffer. And you could search for Neal Schaffer on bookstores like Amazon. Find me there as well.
I would be surprised if people went to Google and they couldn't find you.
Well, with Google's latest updates, you might be. I'm joking. Hopefully, they'll find me.
So great. First question. You have written a lot of books. You've got your Digital Threads book, which you've got out about the same time. What was the inspiration behind the Maximizing LinkedIn for Business Growth?
Yeah, great question, Tim. As you know, I wrote my first two books were about LinkedIn back in 2009, 2011. And I always had a free, what we call in the marketing world, a lead magnet, which is a free PDF that I maintained for many years called Maximizing LinkedIn for Business, about 50 pages long. And it was recently beginning to teach a new class here at UCLA Extension in Los Angeles on personal branding, how to become an influencer. It's an interesting curriculum, which sort of uh,
Mm.
we talk about professional personal branding with LinkedIn, and then we look at the more B2C personal branding with the Instagram and the TikTok. And my students really resonated with LinkedIn, and even though they were there more for the Instagram and TikTok information, and one student in my class said, Professor, I took your advice, and I just received an offer for a job that's going to pay me $10,000 more. And seeing how the information resonated, and that I was teaching a class on personal branding, and that LinkedIn has really changed, I started looking at, well, what is out there on LinkedIn today? And I thought that there was a need for my voice out there in the market. Seeing that, Tim, we've been at this a long time, looking at LinkedIn and social selling. So giving a little bit of historical perspective, but also looking at what's new. That LinkedIn is it's younger. The working demographic is younger. We have new things like generative AI. The way that content rules the feed is very different than it was 5-10 years ago. So I decided to take that 50-page lead magnet, the freebie that I was handing out, and decided to expand it into this 100-page book. And originally, I was just going to put it out there for free. And since I was publishing this other book behind me, I thought, you know what? Why not put it up on Amazon at a discounted price? And it was almost like a test, but I got such good feedback that I'm working on expanding it into a paperback. So that was the inspiration, and that's how it came about.
Because I mean, LinkedIn has changed. I mean, in the conversations that I've had with LinkedIn, they're already talking about, we now have the video feed, for example. But in the conversations I've had with LinkedIn as well, going back to what you said about your students, there's a LinkedIn have a narrative which they're saying, yes, you can be on TikTok and you can be on Instagram, but actually, when brands want to see you, they want to see a serious you, and then they'll go to LinkedIn. So you kind of, and so they're always saying that those people need to have a dual presence.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I teach about influencers, they are entrepreneurs, right? At the end of the day. And I'm of the feeling that everybody's an entrepreneur, even if you're a salary professional. So to me, I couldn't agree more that everybody needs this professional personal brand. And what's really interesting, Tim, is that over time, that professional personal brand, maybe because of COVID and the way that we appreciate more of the authenticity and the rawness of people, the way that we present ourselves professionally at LinkedIn has changed as well. I mean, we would have never put up selfies 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But today it's become very commonplace and very accepting when done in the right way, right? So not only has the network changed, the people joining it changed, but the way that we're publishing and consuming content has also changed.
So I mean, I'm interested in what you're saying about LinkedIn evolution, because you have changed the book, and you've changed what you've actually written in it. So how do you see LinkedIn now when it's connected to someone's business strategy?
Wow, I mean, LinkedIn becomes the center of one's professional life, right? And whether you are in sales or marketing, looking for a job, not looking for a job, it really is the place where people are connecting. And more importantly, I think it's a place where information can be had. No matter what profession you're in, no matter what information you're seeking or just keeping up in the news, LinkedIn has just become this invaluable place where more and more people are contributing to that narrative that I think can help everybody. I also think it's, getting back to the concept of the personal brand. I tell my students, how many of you want to make, $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year, or $300,000 a year? And everybody raises their hand, right? And then I say, well, multiply that by, say, 35. And if you think about it, if you're 25, maybe you'll work until 60, 65. So let's multiply it by 40. So multiply $100,000 by 40, that's $4 million. And I say that's the value of your personal brand. And if you, by being proactive with your personal brand, especially on LinkedIn, can paint a picture that can raise that branding value 1%, 2%, 5%, there's a monetary value to be had there. And that's why I think it becomes really powerful, because it is going to be the place, whether we like it or not, it is the place where people are looking to hire people or do business with people that, whether if you're in professional services or let's say you're like a realtor, insurance sales, people will go there. And the way that they perceive your brand will affect, right, whether they want to work with you or not, and then how much they're going to pay you or not. So that's another important aspect that, we talk about, oh, you need a complete LinkedIn profile, but it really needs to be branded as an inbound marketing tool that will help you reach your objectives and hopefully help improve and increase your personal brand value.
So, what do you see are the key strategies for building a personal brand? And I mean, we've kind of talked about the benefits, but what do you see as the building blocks then?
Well, actually, this is the next book I'm writing, Tim. Speaking about being a prolific writer, I have analyzed. I believe there's 15 different elements, and without going into all of them, when applied to LinkedIn, obviously you have your profile becomes the central place, and a lot of people focus on the textual, but there's a lot of visual elements that go into a profile, and we are visual animals. They say 90% of the information we process is visual, so we have that cover image behind us. We obviously have our professional photo. We have the featured images that are, shown on our profile quite prominently that still a lot of people don't take advantage of that they probably should. So the profile obviously is something that, we've been talking about that for 15 years. And I think that most people understand that, but perhaps the visual aspects, or, maybe I only want to talk about what I do now, but, digging more back into your previous experiences and, giving more of a complete picture of who you are. What are the various experiences, I think is also important. And it also feeds the search engine. It also helps you create this narrative, right? We come back in marketing and even in the sales, that storytelling is so important. And I think that people have a lot of stories to tell about their career, their profession, their history. And if you just limit it to the past 2 or 3 years, I think you miss out on a lot of really deep and insightful and valuable stories. So that's the profile piece. The profile is, you do it once, maybe you come back to it once every few months and check it out. But I think it's something that if everybody watching or listening spends an hour or two, I really think they can, and obviously reading Maximizing LinkedIn for Business Growth will help guide you through the process. I don't think it's like you don't have to pay someone to do it. You don't have to spend, a few days doing it. It really is like a 1 or 2 hour thing, I believe.
But once you've done it, as you said, it's there.
Exactly.
What you do is you talk about optimizing your LinkedIn profile in the book, and I think that this it's great in the way that you're, as you said just now, it's not just about putting your current and your previous job, but basically to go back, because what we're looking for, if you think about what a buyer is looking for in effect your story. And for many of us, that can go back many years. But that, because ultimately what we're doing is, as a buyer, we're looking for trust in a relationship, aren't we?
Exactly.
And we do that now by checking you out online, whether you call it a personal brand or whatever. We always recommend people put their first jobs.
Absolutely.
Because my first job was working in the restaurant, and I was washing up. But what happens is, if other people may see it and go, I was washing up as well, you've built a connection, haven't you?
Yeah, it's Donald Trump at a McDonald's. It's the same thing. It resonates with people, and I agree 100%, Tim. I give the exact same advice. Even I've given. I go back to my high school. I've had high school classmates connect with me on LinkedIn. I go back to where I studied, abroad during my college. So all of that paints this unique picture of you, and it gives you the opportunity to talk about you. And Tim, I'd say, if I'm a buyer and I don't see enough information about your past, it sort of raises a question mark, right? Like, what are you trying to hide? So I also think it's important to give that full picture. And obviously, you want to paint it in the way that shows your best, that is aligned with your brand. But yeah, that's definitely the start. And I believe I began in the book as well that if you were going to build a website, you'd put a little bit of time into thinking about what's the design going to look like? What are you going to say? And the LinkedIn profile for most professionals is their website. If you don't have your own personal website, if someone was to search for you on Google, probably your LinkedIn profile is going to be near the top. So consider it your personal website and just put enough time into it and energy and thoughtfulness to, treat it as your professional website for the rest of your life.
One of the things that I really liked, Neil, was the fact that you actually have recommendations fairly high up in the list of things that you need to be working on, because quite often they're seen as an afterthought.
Hmm.
Why have you? Why? I mean, it's chapter 5 rather than chapter 8. So why are you looking and suggesting to people about recommendations?
Yeah, I looked at other, books in the market. I looked back at my own books and I tried to think of, what are the 10 most important things here, which is why there's basically 10 chapters. LinkedIn groups for me is one that today not nearly as important as it was 10 years ago. And I know that LinkedIn are constantly trying to revive it. I don't think it's there yet. So it's like, you know what? I made the strategic decision to leave that out. But recommendations is always something I come up with because a profile alone is not enough. The recommendations give the credibility, give the social proof that is instrumental in building a personal brand, right? And you don't have to be perceived as a thought leader per se, but if I am looking at two different profiles, deciding who I want to do business with, one has 10 recommendations, one has zero. As human beings, the concept of social proof, we're going to tend to look more at the person that has more recommendations, right? The same reason why we see a post that has a lot of likes, a lot of comments, it immediately draws us compared to something that has no likes or no comments. So absolutely. I tell people, if you've been in business 5, 10, 15, 20 years, especially if you're in sales, how could you have no recommendations, right? They really do back up from a third party perspective, who you are and what you do. And yes, LinkedIn used to have this all-star rating on the profile.
Oh
They,
yes, I did. Yeah.
they recommended you had 3 recommendations, and I still use that as a core. Obviously, the more the better, but yeah, it really is that important. And especially if you work in a really niche industry. I mean, I used to work in an embedded software industry where pretty much everybody knew each other. And imagine getting some key recommendations from some senior executives in that industry. Everybody looking at that recommendation would understand who that person is and the weight that it carries. So yeah, recommendations definitely is something that a lot of people don't put enough weight into. But once again, it's not, you don't have to do this on a regular basis. Although if you're in professional services, if you're a consultant, I would highly recommend that at the end of every, project that you do, you ask for that recommendation. But take a little bit of time and reach out to people from your career that you've worked with, that you've worked under, and let them know how important it is for you to build up some recommendations in your profile. That's usually a way to get that started, to get 1 or 2 or 3 recommendations. And you don't need a lot, like I said, but hopefully you make it part of a routine that when you work with a company, you work with a boss, or you work as part of some organization, that you regularly, routinely ask for those recommendations to keep building up your credibility in your market.
You also talk in the book about building relationships through interaction. So
Yeah.
talk
So
to us about that.
yeah. So I think this is where most people they build the profile and then that's it, right? And
They
really
walk
the
away.
magic happens, I think, in 2 different areas on LinkedIn. One is definitely through the engagement with others. And the whole thing is that you're at this big party and you can just have a profile and just be standing there static, or you can go out and reach out and start talking with people. Very much like a networking party. So,
Yeah.
or networking event. You know, engaging gives you the ability, it gives you an excuse to talk to someone that you might want to know. They could be a influencer or content creator in your industry. They could be someone working at a company that you want to sell to or engage with. But really, that's where the relationship building begins and the learning begins. And if you're on LinkedIn and not engaging with anybody, then you really miss out on the opportunities. And I'd say, Tim, it really begins with just engaging with your own network, keeping top of mind so that when someone in your network says, you know what, we're looking for a company to come in and launch a social selling program, they'll know to contact him because you've been top of mind. You've been engaging with them. They've seen your name in their notifications. They've responded to your comments. So, every day going into your newsfeed and just regularly, engaging with your network is a great place to start. And I'd say once you feel comfortable doing that, then it's more strategically. I mean, if you're in sales, it's obviously with prospects and current customers, but strategically reaching out and getting into this habit of just like you read the newspaper, wherever you read it every morning, of sending out, keeping in touch with your network, seeing what's going on, how you can help people, but also sending those engagement signals can really help in that top of mind with your current network and building relationships with your future network.
You also talk in the book about creating content that resonates on LinkedIn. So give us some advice about creating content.
Yeah, this is the hardest one because most professionals are not natural content creators. And when I give my trainings on LinkedIn, what have you, this is the one where people are like, I have no time for any of this, right? And I totally understand it, which is why I tell people, the content really, if the engagement gets you seen with your network and with potential clients and people in your industry, the content really exponentially does that for you. So getting started with content, in the book I break down there's all different formats of content. And if you think about it, you have textual comment, which is I'm just going to say something. You have link-based content. And sometimes what a lot of employees do is they share the content coming from their employer's company page. And that's a really, really easy way to start, engaging with content. I would recommend if you do that, that you actually put your own comment as to why you're resharing that. Why is that news so important? But that's an easy way just to get started. And what we're finding, Tim, is that compared to other networks, we're finding that a lot of content, maybe you've seen it as well, and those that are viewing and listening as well, that often in your network, you see that someone in your network has liked or commented on a post from a second degree connection. In other words, you're not even connected with this person and you're seeing their content in your feed. This is called virality, right? This is what Facebook used to be 15 years ago, that if you liked someone's Facebook page and their content, it would go out to all your friends. And obviously that no longer happens. But on LinkedIn, it's really the only network where this still happens. And therefore, that comment that you put out there, or content, excuse me, might be liked or commented by someone in your network and then go out to more people outside your network, exposing you and your thoughts. So the reshare of the company page post, the easiest. The text, that's just what your thoughts for the day, a reflection on a recent work experience. Obviously, if you're at an event, especially a company event or a conference, visuals do really, really well on LinkedIn. In fact, I know you mentioned that LinkedIn has a dedicated video feed. I think some people are seeing tremendous success with that. But generally speaking, I think that images, and especially carousels of images, do well as well. Link-based content obviously not doing so well. And then we have videos, right? And I do not expect every professional to be able to be creating videos. Although I will say, as we skew younger and younger in demographic, how many professionals have ever created a video for Facebook or for Instagram? I think that number is only increasing in time, and that people will feel more comfortable with video. But it's really about that getting back to your personal branding. What do you want to talk about? What is your brand about? What is your niche? What is your profession? What advice do you want to share? And I always recommend, if you still don't quite know what you want to share, what you want to talk about, is find your role models. Do searches for people in your industry. Look at their profiles. You can go to their activity tab or activity, section, and look at all the content that they published. And I think that will really inspire you to say, okay, that's something that I can talk about. Or, you know what, I would talk about this in a different way. And hopefully that gets you inspired to talk about something that's relevant to you. Because I don't know about you, Tim, but when I give these presentations, I always try to find examples of LinkedIn content posted by professionals in that specific industry.
Yeah.
right? And I think if once people see that, the light bulb goes on that goes, oh my gosh, I could be doing this and I could be gathering the engagement that these other professionals are gathering. Because, naturally we all have stories, we all have experiences, we all have a lot to share. It's just a matter of putting that into that format, that electronic format on LinkedIn and publishing it out to the world.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you're doing is that you're giving people, what you need to do is show them people like you, because quite often people will look at people like us, Neal, and go, well, you've written so many books, da 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 da, your way, and I'm down here, and
Yep.
or if you go, well, that's a B2C example, and I'm B2B, and
Yep.
you need to give them examples of, say, you're in B2B, you're in retail, look what these people are doing.
Exactly.
Neal, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your or one of your new books. Tell us where we can get it. So it's Maximizing LinkedIn for Business Growth, a practical guide to building your brand and driving results.
Yes, currently only available in ebook. I am, as we speak, expanding it to become a paperback and audiobook. But for the moment, it's only available electronically, but available at Amazon. It's available worldwide. It's wide distribution. So wherever you buy ebooks, you should be able to find it.
And where can we find you?
Once again, Neal Schaffer, NealSchaffer, nealschaffer.com, linkedin.com/in/Neal Schaffer. And I also have a podcast called Your Digital Marketing Coach if you're a podcast listener.
Excellent. Neal, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for